the summit of silk and steel. The crystalline auditorium of Velthera Prime gleamed like a frozen star, its walls constructed from compressed light matter that pulsed with the collective thoughts of the galactic concordance. Ambassador Kira Vasan straightened her charcoal blazer, feeling decidedly underdressed among beings who wore their emotions as bioluminescent displays and their status as gravity-defying crowns. The human delegation, announced Praxis Nam, the Veltheran mediator whose voice resonated through 17 dimensions simultaneously, has requested forum time to address the concordance. 300 species turned their attention, or whatever sensory apparatus they possessed, toward Kira. The Laren contingent rippled their chromatophores in what she'd learned was contemptuous amusement. The Dorvakian hive mind emitted a low-frequency hum that translated roughly to, "This should be entertaining." Kira had prepared for this moment for 6 months. Humanity's application to join the concordance had been pending for 3 years, stuck in what her team called bureaucratic purgatory. Every species needed unanimous approval. They had 299 votes in favor. The Larans, a species of crystalline intelligence who communicated through quantum entanglement and made decisions through pure mathematical consensus, held the final vote. And they found humanity's methods primitive. Ambassador Vasan, Praxis Nam's tendrils gestured toward the speaking platform, "You may present your argument." Kira stepped forward, her boots clicking against the crystalline floor, a sound that seemed almost violent in the space where most species floated, phased, or existed as coherent energy fields. "Honored members of the concordance," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 3 years ago, humanity submitted our application for membership. We were told our technology was adequate, our culture fascinating, and our potential concerning. The Laren cluster, 7 beings who functioned as one entity named Theorem of Stillness, pulsed with cold light. Their translated voice filled the chamber. "Your species resolves disputes through confrontation. Your decision-making processes are chaotic, inefficient, and rooted in emotional appeal rather than logical convergence. You argue. You debate. You waste energy on disagreement rather than achieving instantaneous consensus through shared consciousness." A murmur of agreement rippled through several delegations. Kira nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right. We debate. Fiercely. Loudly. Sometimes with considerably colorful language." She smiled. "We've been doing it for thousands of years." "Precisely our concern," Theorem of Stillness responded. "Primitive conflict resolution." "May I tell you a story?" Kira asked. Praxis Nam's sensory organs swiveled uncertainly. Stories weren't typical concordance protocol, but no rule forbade them. "Proceed." 250 years ago, Kira began, Earth faced an existential crisis. Our climate was collapsing, resources were depleting, and our species was divided into competing factions that had nearly destroyed ourselves in conflicts we call world wars. Several species shifted uncomfortably. Warfare was known to the concordance only as historical barbarism. "We had 2 proposed solutions," Kira continued. "The first was the harmonic protocol, a plan to upload human consciousness into a unified digital network, achieving instant consensus and perfect efficiency. We would become, essentially, one mind with billions of nodes. No more disagreement. No more debate." She paused, letting that sink in. "The second was the fractured path, maintain individual consciousness, accept our messy disagreements and solve problems through collaborative conflict. Through debate." "Obviously you chose poorly," Theorem of Stillness intoned. "Did we?" Kira's eyes sparkled. "The harmonic protocol would have been efficient. Perfect even. But here's what we realized. Consensus isn't truth. Agreement isn't innovation. Comfort isn't progress." She pulled up a holographic display, a technique she'd learned from her Veltheran tutors. Images flickered into existence. Humans in heated discussion, scientists arguing over data, philosophers challenging each other's premises, artists defending wildly different visions. Every major advancement in human history came from someone saying "you're wrong and here's why." From someone standing up in opposition and forcing us to defend our ideas, strengthen them or abandon them entirely. We didn't get to the stars through consensus. We got here through contradiction. "Chaos," the Laren entity stated flatly. "Productive chaos," Kira corrected. "The Velthera admire our art born from artists who vehemently disagreed about what beauty means. The Karathi use our medical advances discovered when researchers challenged established theories. The humans are space orc stories the Plexians love? Those exist because our storytellers constantly debate what makes a compelling narrative." She stepped closer to the center of the chamber. You call debate primitive. We call it Tuesday. It's not a flaw in our system, it's the system itself. And I'm here not to convince you we're perfect, but to demonstrate why our imperfection makes us strong. Theorem of stillness pulsed with an unfamiliar pattern. You have presented your argument. We shall deliberate. Kira bowed slightly. Actually, I'm not finished. I haven't presented my argument yet. The chamber fell silent. That was just the introduction. The mechanism of madness. The crystalline auditorium's atmosphere processors worked overtime as 300 species collectively held whatever they used for breath. Praxis Nam's tendrils curled into a configuration that Kira's translator struggled to interpret, somewhere between intrigued and administratively concerned. Ambassador Vasan, the mediator's multidimensional voice carried a note of uncertainty. The standard format allows for a 30-minute presentation followed by questions. I'm aware, Kira replied smoothly. I'm requesting an extension under Concordance Protocol 779, Demonstration of Cultural Methodology. A ripple of surprise cascaded through the assembly. Protocol 779 was ancient, rarely invoked, and designed for species whose communication methods couldn't be easily translated. The harmonic singers of Bellatrix 9 had used it to perform a 3-day song cycle. The phase walkers of dimension-adjacent space had used it to exist in 12 time streams simultaneously for observation purposes. No one had ever used it for a debate. Theorem of stillness pulsed with sharp, angular light. You wish to demonstrate human debate methodology? We have observed your news broadcasts, your political forums, your academic conferences. We find them distressing. Because you're watching the performance, Kira said, not understanding the mechanism. She gestured to the empty space beside her. I'd like to invite my colleague to join me. Through the chamber's entrance strode Commander Marcus Elwood, her debate partner, wearing his military dress uniform with enough medals to qualify as armor. Where Kira embodied diplomatic grace, Marcus represented Earth's military pragmatism, a calculated choice. The Dorvakian hive mind's hum increased in frequency. Military presence at Concordance proceedings was unusual, though not forbidden. Commander Elwood and I, Kira explained, have been partners for 12 years. We've negotiated 17 treaties, resolved 3 border disputes and prevented 2 wars. We also disagree on approximately 60% of all policy matters. Marcus nodded cordially to the assembly. She's being generous. It's closer to 70%. Several species exchanged confused signals. How could partners disagree so fundamentally yet work together? Today, Kira continued, we're going to debate humanity's greatest philosophical question, one we've been arguing about for as long as we've had language. What makes a life valuable? The chamber's ambient temperature dropped several degrees. Several species immediately flagged the topic as potentially dangerous. Philosophical recursion loops had crashed more than one hive mind civilization. Praxis Nam's tendrils twisted nervously. Ambassador, such topics are typically explored through meditation and consensus-building retreats lasting several standard cycles. We'll do it in 30 minutes, Marcus said cheerfully. Kira, you want to start or should I? Your turn to play devil's advocate, Kira replied. Devil's advocate? A translator somewhere in the assembly squeaked in alarm. Human idiom, Kira assured everyone. It means arguing for a position you might not personally hold, to strengthen the opposing argument through challenge. Theorem of stillness flickered with what might have been confusion. You intentionally argue against your own beliefs? That is illogical. That's the point, Marcus said, rolling up his sleeves in a gesture that screamed, let's get to work. Watch and learn. He turned to face Kira, his expression shifting from friendly colleague to intellectual combatant. Ambassador Vasan, you've stated that what makes a life valuable is consciousness, the ability to think, feel, and experience. I contend this is an inadequate metric. Kira's eyes sharpened. The diplomacy fell away, replaced by the fierce intelligence that had earned her 3 advanced degrees by age 25. Please elaborate, Commander. By your definition, a species in hibernation, fully unconscious, would temporarily lose value. A human in a coma would be worthless. That's ethically untenable. Not at all, Kira countered. You're confusing temporary state with capability. A sleeping being still possesses consciousness. It's simply not actively engaged. The potential remains. Potential. Marcus leaned forward. Then an unfertilized egg has the potential for consciousness. Is it equally valuable to an adult being? The assembly watched in what could only be described as horrified fascination. The two humans were attacking each other's positions with surgical precision, yet showed no signs of the emotional distress that typically accompanied concordance disagreements. False equivalence, Kira shot back. Potential consciousness without activation differs fundamentally from temporarily inactive consciousness. One has never experienced, the other has merely paused. You're drawing an arbitrary line, Marcus pressed. What about artificial intelligence? Our ship's navigation AI processes information, learns, adapts, but we don't grant it personhood. Why? Because it lacks subjective experience. It simulates responses without genuine qualia. Prove it. The challenge hung in the air. Kira paused, visibly considering. I can't, she admitted. Not definitively. That's the hard problem of consciousness. We can't prove subjective experience exists anywhere except in ourselves. Then your entire framework collapses, Marcus said triumphantly. Unless, Kira countered with a slight smile, we accept that certainty is impossible and proceed with practical ethics based on reasonable assumptions and observable evidence. Marcus grinned back. Now you're talking. They turned to face the assembly together. Notice something? Kira asked the stunned gathering. The dance of contradictions. Theorem of stillness broke the silence first, their crystalline structure resonating with an unfamiliar frequency. You attacked each other's positions with enthusiasm. Yet you display no signs of conflict distress. Your biochemical markers indicate enjoyment. Marcus laughed, a sound that made several empathic species flinch. That's because we are enjoying it. Ambassador Vossen just demolished my argument about artificial consciousness, and I'm genuinely happy about it. This makes no sense, interjected Peter Vix, representative of the Karathi collective, whose species made decisions through ritual combat between designated champions. Even they looked uncomfortable. In our culture, philosophical defeat means status loss. You seem pleased to be proven wrong? Because being proven wrong means I learned something, Marcus explained. 10 minutes ago, I thought I had a solid argument about consciousness and potential. Kira just showed me the flaw. Now I'm smarter than I was 10 minutes ago. That's a victory, not a defeat. Kira stepped forward. This is what you're missing about human debate. It's not about winning or losing, it's about the refinement of ideas through conflict. We're not enemies, we're collaborators in the pursuit of better understanding. She activated another holographic display. This one showed neurons firing, networks forming and reforming. Human brains are neurologically wired for pattern recognition through contradiction. When we encounter information that challenges our beliefs, our anterior cingulate cortex lights up, the same region that processes physical pain. Disagreement literally hurts us. Then why do it? Asked Shimmer of Dawn, a Plexian whose people communicated through bioluminescent poetry and found conflict deeply traumatic. Because the alternative is worse, Kira said simply. Unchallenged beliefs calcify. They become dogma. And dogma leads to stagnation, which leads to extinction. Marcus picked up the thread. Let me give you a concrete example. 200 years ago, human scientists believed our genetic code was largely junk DNA, meaningless sequences that served no purpose. This was consensus. 98% of geneticists agreed. But one researcher, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, stood in front of her colleagues and said, "You're all wrong." She presented evidence that this so-called junk DNA actually regulated gene expression in complex ways. Her peers attacked her research mercilessly. They found every flaw, challenged every assumption, demanded extraordinary evidence. And she was correct, Kira continued. But she only became correct through that gauntlet of opposition. Her peers' challenges forced her to strengthen her methodology, gather more data, refine her models. The final theory that emerged was far stronger than her initial hypothesis, because it had been forged in the fire of academic combat. Theorem of stillness pulsed thoughtfully. This is inefficient. In our collective, such truth would emerge instantaneously through shared consciousness. No conflict necessary. But would it be truth? Kira challenged gently. Or would it be consensus masquerading as truth? The SH Laren entity flickered, an unprecedented display of uncertainty. May I pose a question to the concordance? Marcus asked. Praxis Nam gestured assent. Has the concordance ever made a decision that, in retrospect, was incorrect? Uncomfortable silence descended. Finally, Peter Vix spoke. The concordance is not infallible, but such instances are rare and typically result from incomplete information. Exactly, Kira said. Incomplete information. Now, how did you discover the information was incomplete? More silence. Let me guess, Marcus said. Some piece of contrary evidence emerged that couldn't be ignored. Something that contradicted the consensus. And suddenly you had to re-evaluate everything. Praxis Nam's tendrils curled introspectively. The commander's assessment is accurate. That's what human debate does, Kira explained, her voice warming with passion. It institutionalizes the search for contrary evidence. We don't wait for contradictions to emerge accidentally, we actively hunt for them. Every argument is met with counterargument. Every thesis with antithesis. Every position with opposition. She began to pace, her movements energetic. The Velthara create beauty through harmonic resonance, frequencies that align perfectly. Humans create beauty through dissonance that resolves. Jazz music, our most innovative art form, is literally built on the tension between expected and unexpected notes. The Karathi resolve disputes through combat, letting the strongest prevail. We resolve disputes through dialectic, letting the strongest idea prevail, and that idea might come from the physically weakest among us. A child can defeat an emperor's argument if the child's logic is sound. Marcus nodded. The Dorvakian hive mind achieves unity through shared consciousness. We achieve unity through shared commitment to the process of disagreement. E pluribus unum, out of many one. Not through conformity, but through the synthesis of diverse perspectives. Shimmer of dawn's bioluminescence shifted to a contemplative amber. You're describing a mechanism that uses conflict as fuel for progress. Exactly, Kira exclaimed. Every human innovation, from fire to faster-than-light travel, emerged from someone disagreeing with the status quo. Someone saying the old way is wrong. Here's a better way. But surely, theorem of stillness interjected, this leads to endless conflict? How do you ever reach conclusions? Kira and Marcus exchanged glances. Now that, Marcus said with a grin, is where it gets interesting. The synthesis protocol. Kira pulled up a new holographic display, this one showing Earth's United Assembly, the planetary governing body that had replaced the old United Nations a century ago. The chamber was chaos incarnate, representatives shouting, gesturing wildly, screens flashing with competing data sets. This, she said, is Tuesday morning. Standard session. What you're seeing is 247 representatives from every nation, culture, and ideology on Earth, engaged in fierce debate over freshwater allocation rights. The Concordance delegates watched with visible discomfort. Several species translation matrices struggled to keep up with the rapid-fire exchanges, the interruptions, the overlapping arguments. It appears violent, Shimmer of Dawn observed, their light dimming with distress. It's passionate, Marcus corrected. But watch what happens next. The hologram fast-forwarded. The chaos continued for 3 hours, then something shifted. Arguments began to crystallize into patterns. Representatives who had been fierce opponents started building on each other's points. A woman from the African Coalition incorporated data from an Asian Federation delegate who'd been contradicting her minutes earlier. A man from the Arctic territories refined his position based on criticism from an oceanic representative. See that? Kira pointed to a particular exchange. Representative Chin just completely changed her position after Representative Okonkwo presented flood data she hadn't considered. She stood up and said, "You're right, I was wrong, we need to revise the proposal." And she wasn't demoted? Exiled? Her status remained unchanged. Peter Vix asked incredulously. Her status increased, Marcus said. Because in human culture, the ability to change your mind when presented with better evidence is a sign of strength, not weakness. We call it intellectual integrity. The hologram continued. The chaos resolved into 3 competing proposals, each incorporating elements from dozens of different arguments. The representatives voted, not for their preferred option, but for the one they believed best served the collective good based on the evidence presented. The final allocation plan, Kira explained, was one that no single person had originally proposed. It emerged from the synthesis of contradictory positions. The northern delegates wanted infrastructure focus. The southern delegates wanted ecosystem preservation. The island nations wanted desalination investment. The final plan did all 3, because the debate revealed they weren't mutually exclusive. They were complementary when properly integrated. Theorem of stillness pulsed with a new pattern, focused, analytical. This is iterative refinement through adversarial collaboration. Exactly. Kira beamed like a teacher whose student had just grasped a difficult concept. That's the perfect way to describe it. But how do you know when to stop debating? Asked Praxis Nam, whose species could deliberate for standard years without fatigue. Surely arguments could continue indefinitely? Marcus stepped forward. That's the beautiful part. We've developed metasystems for managing the debate process itself. Robert's rules of order, parliamentary procedure, debate time limits, structured formats. We argue about how to argue. He activated a new display showing various debate formats: Oxford style, Lincoln Douglas, parliamentary debate, Socratic dialogue, even the structured chaos of a scientific peer review process. Each format serves a different purpose, Marcus explained. Oxford style for exploring broad philosophical questions. Lincoln Douglas for ethical dilemmas. Parliamentary for policy decisions. We've weaponized disagreement and then created rules of engagement to keep it productive. And when debates become genuinely destructive? Shimmer of Dawn asked. Surely your species experiences unproductive conflict? Absolutely, Kira admitted freely. We're not claiming perfection. We have flame wars, bad faith arguments, demagogues who exploit debate for manipulation rather than enlightenment. We have people who argue just to argue, who care more about winning than truth. Then how is your system superior? Theorem of stillness challenged, their crystalline structure sharpening as if preparing for combat. Because we know it's flawed, Marcus said simply. That's the point. We've built error correction into the system itself. When debate becomes toxic, we debate about how to fix the debate. When arguments become circular, we argue about argumentation methods. When someone abuses the process, we argue about what constitutes abuse. Kira moved to stand beside Marcus, presenting a united front. Every other species in this chamber has found a way to avoid conflict through consensus, hive minds, mathematical certainty, or meditation. You've eliminated the pain of disagreement. And in doing so, you've eliminated its benefits. She gestured to the assembly. How many of your species have fundamentally changed your governmental structure in the last 1,000 years? Silence. How many have revolutionized your foundational philosophies? More silence. How many have had a paradigm shift in how you understand reality itself? The silence became profound. Humans have done all three in the last century alone, Marcus said quietly. Not despite our constant arguing, but because of it. We're not afraid to tear down our own beliefs and build something better from the rubble. Kira's voice softened. You call debate primitive. But what if the primitive thing is avoiding growth because it requires pain? What if true sophistication is embracing productive conflict as the price of wisdom? Theorem of stillness flickered rapidly, their quantum entangled consciousness processing at visible speeds. You wish us to accept chaos as methodology, the Laren entity finally said. No, Kira replied. We wish you to accept that truth emerges from the collision of ideas, not their peaceful coexistence. The historical weight. Praxis Nam's tendrils formed a contemplative spiral. A gesture Kira had learned indicated deep consideration. The concordance acknowledges the theoretical merit of your argumentative methodology. However, theory diverges from practice. You present debate as enlightenment, yet your species' history suggests it more often produces violence. Kira had been waiting for this. You're referring to our wars. Among other conflicts, yes. Theorem of stillness pulsed with cold certainty. Your species has engaged in over 15,000 documented armed conflicts. You've developed philosophy and weapons in equal measure. How do you reconcile celebrating debate while acknowledging your violent nature? Marcus cleared his throat. May I respond to this one? Kira nodded, stepping back slightly. This was the moment they'd rehearsed, the pivot point of the entire presentation. I'm a soldier, Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Fourth-generation military. My great-grandmother fought in the water wars, my grandmother in the colonial rebellion, my father in the AI rights conflict. I've seen combat. I've ordered people to their deaths. I've made decisions that haunt me every single day. The chamber held its collective breath. And I'm here to tell you that war and debate aren't opposites. They're related evolutionary stages. War is what happens when debate fails. But here's what you're missing. We learn from every single failure. He pulled up historical footage, carefully curated, non-graphic but impactful. Ancient battlefields transitioning to medieval castles, to trenches, to devastated cities, to the final conflicts of the 21st century. Every war taught us something about the cost of failed communication. After World War I, we created the League of Nations, flawed but an attempt at institutionalized debate. After World War II, the United Nations, better but still insufficient. After the Resource Wars, the Continental Councils. After the AI writes conflict, the conscious beings accords. Kira rejoined him. Each iteration refined our mechanisms for resolving disputes through words instead of weapons. We didn't get it right immediately. We failed repeatedly, catastrophically. But we kept trying. She displayed a graph showing Earth's armed conflicts over time. The early history was a jagged mountain range of warfare. But around 2050 something changed. The peaks became smaller, less frequent. By 2200, major conflicts had essentially ceased. What happened? Asked Peter Vix, whose Karathi culture still maintained ritual combat as central to their identity. We made debate mandatory before warfare, Marcus explained. The Johannesburg Accords of 2073 established that no nation could engage in armed conflict without first submitting to 90 days of mediated debate. Not negotiation, debate. With full transparency broadcast to every citizen, with rotating mediators from neutral parties. Sounds inefficient in crisis situations, Theorem of Stillness observed. It was, Kira admitted. We lost territory in the Siberian dispute because we spent 3 months arguing while our opponents fortified their position. But you know what? After 90 days of public debate, our own citizens voted against military action. They'd heard both sides, examined the evidence, and concluded the conflict wasn't worth the cost. Democracy intervened, Marcus continued. Once people actually understood the arguments, not propaganda but real debate with cross-examination and evidence, they made different choices. Turns out most wars look a lot less appealing when you have to defend them in front of philosophers, economists, and military strategists simultaneously. Shimmer of dawn's bioluminescence brightened with understanding. You institutionalized accountability through argumentative transparency. Exactly, Kira confirmed. But it went deeper than that. We started teaching formal debate in elementary schools. By age 8, every human child learns to construct arguments, identify logical fallacies, engage with opposing viewpoints, and change their mind based on evidence. She displayed images of children, diverse, energetic, engaged in what looked like intense discussion over everything from playground rules to science fair topics. We made critical thinking a fundamental skill like reading or mathematics. Not just the ability to argue but the ability to argue well. To distinguish good arguments from bad ones. To recognize when someone's manipulating you versus when they're genuinely challenging your assumptions. Marcus pulled up more recent data. 3 generations of universal debate education later, and look at the results. Political extremism down 73%. Violent crime down 68%. Scientific innovation up 240%. Why? Because debate trains empathy, Kira answered her partner's rhetorical question. To argue effectively, you must understand your opponent's position. Really understand it, not caricature it. You have to inhabit their perspective, see through their eyes, comprehend their values and fears and hopes. She turned to face Theorem of Stillness directly. You achieve understanding through quantum entanglement, sharing consciousness directly. We achieve it through the harder path, imaginative projection, intellectual role-playing, empathic reasoning. It's slower, messier, more prone to error. But it's ours and it works. The violence you reference, Marcus added, came from failed debate. But the peace we've achieved came from successful debate. We didn't transcend our nature, we refined it. Peter Vix leaned forward, their combat-hardened features showing unexpected interest. You're claiming debate is your weapon, your religion, your entertainment, and your governance all in one? Kira smiled. We're claiming it's our survival mechanism. And we're offering to share it. The practical application. Theorem of Stillness's crystalline structure shifted into a formation Kira's xenopsychology training identified as aggressive skepticism. Your presentation has been comprehensive. But the concordance deals in practical application, not philosophical abstraction. Demonstrate how human debate methodology solves real problems that current concordance approaches cannot. Fair challenge, Marcus acknowledged. He gestured to the holographic display. May I present Exhibit A, the Kepler 442 terraform stalemate. A murmur of recognition rippled through the assembly. The Kepler 442 situation was a concordance embarrassment, a habitable planet discovered 15 years ago, claimed simultaneously by the Velthera and the Dorvakian collective, with both species having legitimate historical and biological arguments for colonization rights. After a decade and a half of meditation circles, consensus-building retreats, and mathematical modeling, the concordance was no closer to resolution. We studied your deadlock, Kira said. And we identified the core problem. You're seeking consensus where none is possible. The Velthera need crystalline formations to reproduce. Kepler 442's mineral composition is perfect. The Dovrekian collective requires specific atmospheric pressure to maintain hive cohesion. Kepler 442 is one of 3 known planets with those exact conditions. Both claims are equally valid, intoned the Veltheran mediator Praxis Nam. Thus, we seek a solution satisfactory to all parties. That's your problem, Marcus said bluntly. You're waiting for a solution that makes everyone happy. That solution doesn't exist. You need a solution that makes everyone acceptably unhappy. Shocked silence. Explain, demanded Theorem of Stillness. Kira activated a new presentation. We propose what we call adversarial mediation. Here's how it works. Each party selects their 3 strongest arguments for colonization rights. These aren't presented to mediators, they're presented to their opponents' advocates. I'm not following, Shimmer of Dawn admitted. Each side has to argue the opposing position, Marcus clarified. Velthera representatives must present the strongest possible Dovrekian case. Dovrekian representatives must present the strongest possible Velthera case. You argue against your own interests. The assembly erupted in confused chatter across 17 different communication modalities. This is madness, a Dovrekian subnode protested. Why would we strengthen our opponent's position? Because, Kira explained patiently, you can't defeat an argument you don't understand. And you can't reach fair compromise without genuinely comprehending what the other side stands to lose. She pulled up a simulation they'd run with volunteer delegates. We tested this with human proxies representing both sides. After each group argued the opposing position for 30 minutes, something remarkable happened. They proposed a solution the actual parties hadn't considered. The hologram showed the proposed solution. Kepler 442 would be divided into 3 zones. Velthera optimized, Dovrekian optimized, and a shared zone where both species would collaborate on hybrid structures that partially met each species' needs while creating something unprecedented. The hybrid zone wouldn't be perfect for either species, Marcus noted. But by forcing each side to argue for their opponents, they discovered complementary needs. Velthera crystal formations could actually enhance Dovrekian atmospheric pressure management. Dovrekian pressure fields could stabilize Velthera reproductive matrices. A solution emerged from structured opposition, Kira said. Neither side got everything they wanted, but both got something sustainable. And more importantly, they understood why they couldn't get everything, because they'd argued the opposing position themselves. Praetor Vix stood, their warrior's posture radiating interest. The Karathi collective has a border dispute with the Zenthian Protectorate over the Sigma Draconis asteroid field. Our ritual combat solution failed because Zenthians are pacifists who refuse to fight. Could this method work? Absolutely, Marcus said. In fact, that's an ideal application. You'd argue the Zenthian pacifist position. Why violence is unacceptable, why peaceful coexistence serves both species better. They'd argue your position. Why resource control requires clear hierarchy, why strength determines rights. I would never argue such a thing, Praetor Vix protested. Exactly, Kira said gently. Which is why it would be so valuable. The arguments you refuse to make are often the ones you most need to understand. Theorem of Stillness pulsed rapidly, their quantum-entangled consciousness processing the implications. You're proposing we institutionalize cognitive dissonance as conflict resolution methodology. We're proposing you weaponize empathy, Marcus corrected. Cognitive dissonance is just the discomfort of growth. Shimmer of Dawn's bioluminescence shifted to curious violet. The Plexian Consortium has struggled with internal schisms over our population expansion into contested nebulae. Traditional consensus building has only deepened divisions because each faction becomes more entrenched in their position. Could adversarial mediation help? Kira's eyes lit up. It's perfect for internal disputes. Each faction argues for the opposing faction's positions in public forum. Not to win, to truly understand. Then you synthesize from that understanding. But what prevents bad faith arguments? Asked a Dovrekian subnode. What stops participants from intentionally presenting weak versions of opposing positions? Independent evaluation, Marcus explained. The opposition judges whether you've argued their position faithfully. If you strawman their argument, they call you out and you try again. The goal isn't to win the argument, it's to demonstrate you've genuinely understood it. The Tuesday Revolution. The crystalline auditorium had transformed over the past hour. What began as a standard concordance proceeding had become something unprecedented. 300 species engaged in actual discussion rather than formal presentations. Delegates were arguing with each other, challenging points, building on ideas. The chamber's ambient temperature had risen 15 degrees from the sheer energy of intellectual exchange. Praxis Nam's tendrils were knotted in what Kira had learned was the Veltheran equivalent of excited confusion. Order. We must maintain something resembling protocol. This is what debate looks like, Kira said, grinning at the controlled chaos she and Marcus had unleashed. Messy, energetic, and alive. Theorem of stillness pulsed with an entirely new pattern, one that Kira's translator took several seconds to parse before settling on, intellectual vertigo combined with grudging fascination. Ambassador Vossen, Commander Elwood, the SH-Laren entity said, their quantum-entangled consciousness speaking with unprecedented uncertainty. You have demonstrated that human debate methodology produces results. You have shown its theoretical merit and practical applications. But you have not addressed our fundamental concern. The chamber quieted, all attention focusing on the crystalline beings whose single vote had blocked humanity's admission for 3 years. We fear, Theorem of Stillness continued, that introducing this methodology to the concordance will destabilize our carefully maintained consensus. Your debate is a virus of uncertainty. Once introduced, it cannot be contained. Kira and Marcus exchanged glances. This was it, the final challenge. You're absolutely right, Kira said simply. The admission sent a shock through the assembly. Debate is destabilizing, she continued. It questions everything, challenges consensus, introduces doubt where certainty existed. It's uncomfortable, sometimes painful, often frustrating. It will absolutely change the concordance. Then you acknowledge the danger, Theorem of Stillness stated. No, Marcus interjected. We acknowledge the risk. There's a difference. Danger implies harm. Risk implies potential cost for potential gain. And the potential gain is survival. He activated a final holographic display, this one showing concordance expansion over the past millennium. The graph was nearly flat, a long plateau of stability. You've reached equilibrium, Marcus observed. For 1,000 years, the concordance has maintained perfect balance. Same territories, same technologies, same philosophical frameworks. You've achieved what every civilization dreams of, sustainable stability. And you view this as weakness? Peter Vix challenged. We view it as vulnerability, Kira corrected gently. The universe doesn't care about your stability. Entropy doesn't respect consensus. Eventually, something will challenge the concordance, a new species, an environmental catastrophe, a paradigm shift in physics itself. And when that happens, your ability to adapt quickly will determine survival. She pulled up humanity's historical graph again. Wild oscillations, catastrophic failures, rapid recoveries, explosive innovations. Our history looks chaotic because it is chaotic. We fail constantly. But we also adapt constantly. When the climate collapsed, we argued our way to solutions. When AI achieved consciousness, we debated ourselves into new ethics. When faster-than-light travel seemed impossible, we challenged every assumption until we found the impossibility was in our thinking, not the physics. The concordance will face its own impossible challenges, Marcus added. And when that day comes, will you be able to tear down your own beliefs fast enough to survive? Or will your consensus become your coffin? Theorem of Stillness flickered through a rainbow of patterns. The other SH-Laren nodes, previously perfectly synchronized, began showing subtle variations in their pulsing. You're doing it right now, Shimmer of Dawn whispered in awe. The SH-Laren collective is experiencing internal debate. Look at their synchronization variance. It was true. For the first time in recorded concordance history, the SH-Laren hive mind was exhibiting non-unanimous cognitive patterns. What's happening to us? One SH-Laren node asked, their voice individual rather than collective. You're thinking independently, Kira said softly. Even if only for a moment. You're experiencing the discomfort of uncertainty. The question is, does it feel more like dying or more like waking up? A long silence followed. Then, slowly, Theorem of Stillness's central node pulsed with a new pattern, one that translated as cautious openness. If we accept humanity into the concordance, the entity said, if we embrace this methodology of productive conflict, everything will change. Yes, Kira agreed. Our consensus will fracture. Probably. Our certainty will dissolve. Almost certainly. And you claim this is beneficial? Marcus smiled. We claim it's alive. Stagnation is just a slow death. Debate is messy, uncomfortable, and uncertain. But it's also growth, adaptation, and evolution. Theorem of stillness's nodes began to resynchronize, but not into their previous pattern, into something new, something that incorporated the variance they'd just experienced. Very well, the entity said. The SH Laren Collective withdraws its objection to humanity's concordance membership. On one condition. Kira's heart raced. Name it. You must teach us to argue. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of responses: surprise, concern, excitement, fear. Praxis Nam's tendrils flailed helplessly, trying to restore order. Marcus laughed, the sound cutting through the chaos. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings beyond binary classification, welcome to Tuesday. Shimmer of Dawn's bioluminescence flashed with what could only be joy. I move that we adjourn this session and reconvene in smaller groups to debate the implications of accepting debate methodology into concordance proceedings. I second that motion, Praetor Vix announced. And I challenge the Velthran delegation's position on resource allocation ethics. I believe they're wrong and I'm prepared to argue why. I accept your challenge, Praxis Nam said, tendrils forming a configuration that looked suspiciously like a competitive grin. As the concordance dissolved into animated discussion groups, arguing about how to argue about introducing argumentation, Kira turned to Marcus. We did it, she said quietly. We introduced chaos to perfection, Marcus agreed. They're going to hate us sometimes. And thank us more often, Kira countered. That's debatable, Marcus said with a wink. Kira groaned at the pun. Ben smiled. Good. Debate is exactly what they need. Across the crystalline auditorium, 300 species that had coexisted in peaceful consensus for a millennium began the messy, uncomfortable, exhilarating work of disagreeing with each other. It was, as humans would say, a Tuesday. But for the concordance it was a revolution. 6 months later. The concordance had established the Department of Productive Conflict, with Ambassador Kira Vasan as its first director. The SH Laren Collective had fragmented into 17 distinct philosophical schools, and reported higher innovation rates than the previous 1,000 years combined. The Kepler 442 dispute was resolved using adversarial mediation, with both species now collaborating on hybrid structures neither had imagined possible. The Velthra developed a new art form based on dissonant harmonics. The Dorvakian hive mind learned to maintain unity while permitting internal disagreement. The Plexians discovered that their bioluminescent poetry became more profound when challenged. And throughout the galaxy, on countless worlds and stations, beings who had spent millennia seeking consensus began to discover the strange joy of a good argument. They called it debate. Humans called it Tuesday.